from Vancouver's perspective, going through a full rebuild now to get themselves rid of the contract might be more beneficial to them overall. If they can bring in one piece as part of a package that is like the primary centerpiece of that deal, somebody that can play with them, moving forward, a young asset that they feel, it's not going to be a first-line caliber player, but a solid NHL asset along with a few picks and prospects. That seems to be what would entice them.
There's Dave Pagnuto of the fourthperiod.com for Hockey Heaven at 11. Earlier today on Campbell versus Gallo, it's Habs Lunch. Peter Vryonis in for Campbell. I'm Gallo. Our hot topic today, and we'll get to it during Habs Your Say as well. Should the Canadiens try to acquire Elias Pettersson from the Vancouver Canucks? Peter, I've said multiple times during the show that I think the answer is yes. I think Elias Pettersson should be a target of the Montreal Canadiens. Elias Pettersson is a player who has produced consistently in his NHL career for 6 seasons, and he's had 2 troubling seasons since signing his massive 8-year deal in Vancouver. It pretty much started from the moment he signed the contract. Went into the playoffs in 23-24 and really underperformed for 2 playoff series. One where the Vancouver Canucks beat the Nashville Predators, and then they lose in 7 games to the Edmonton Oilers in round 2. Elias Pettersson held to just 1 goal in 13 games in those playoffs. And since then, it's kind of snowballed into year 1 and 2 of the 8-year contract extension. But before the struggles of Elias Pettersson as a rookie scored 28 goals and 66 points. He then was just under a point a game with 66 points in 68 games. In the COVID season, he had 21 points in 26 games, again, just under a point per game. In 2021-22, he had 32 goals and 68 points in 80 games. And then he had his big century mark, 102 points, including almost 40 goals in 80 games in 22-23. Year after that, again, well over a point per game, 89 points in 82 games, and now the 2 years that have not been good. Now, Elias Pettersson has not played good for 2 years, and the contract has 6 more years after this one at over $11 million. That is why Vancouver is trying to trade him. Also, the Vancouver Canucks are kind of caught in no man's land. But I think if you look at slotting, Pettersson would fit perfectly on the Canadian second line. I think if you look at offensive talent, he would be perfect to play with Ivan Demidov. And I think if you look at Vancouver selling this player low, selling this player at 50 cents on the dollar, the only gamble here is the term and the contract. And I'm willing to gamble that to get a player like Elias Pettersson. Here's my main issue with the way a lot of people view things. Because they'll say no to almost anything. Nobody wants to take any risk anymore. Nobody wants to gamble anymore. Everybody says the Canadiens need a bona fide top 6 player to step in and play for this team right now. But then you say, oh, you want this player? No, I don't like his contract. Oh, you want this player? No, I don't want to give up what it's going to cost to get him. At some point, you're going to have to risk something. Because if it's that easy a move, if a team is just going to give a player away, that's a bona fide top 6 player, he's going to be on a friendly deal, and it's not going to cost you any assets, you're playing PS5. Because it just doesn't happen that way. There is going to be a risk in any type of deal that you make. If you prefer Robert Thomas, cool. I love Robert Thomas too, and I would try to trade him. For me, though, if the asking price is Hage, Gooley, or Kapanen, maybe it's Gooley and Kapanen, and then a first or 2 first-round picks, to me, that kind of gamble, I don't want to take it. I don't want to start parting ways with prospects that are going to be future players for the Montreal Canadiens to bring in a body unless I think there's no risk with the body and he is the sure bet best player in the deal. For me, I think replacing Caden Gooley would be very, very hard if that player is removed from the Canadiens roster. So that's where I'm hesitant on that one. As far as the cap space and the money, I can kick that can down the road, and I'll figure it out with Elias Pettersson. I like the player. I know people are also down on the player. And maybe that's just he's not your cup of tea. He's not the guy that you want. You want somebody, quote unquote, a little grittier, a little tougher, a little meaner, a little more playoff branded hockey style of player. I understand where you're coming from. Talent is hard to find. This is a player who picked up 100 points in a season. The Montreal Canadiens currently on their roster have 0 players that have done that in their National Hockey League careers. 0. In fact, the 39 goals that Pettersson has, nobody's done that on the Canadiens either. This is a player with a lot of talent that's being sold low, and that's why I would like to take the gamble.
I agree with you in terms of taking a gamble, and I'm all for that. But this, for my taste, too big of a gamble, Mitch. And it's because of that term, and it's because of that contract. So, sure, the asking price might be astronomically higher for a guy like Robert Thomas. But you know what you're getting out of Robert Thomas. There hasn't been that fluctuation from year to year with him. It's been pretty consistent over a large 4 or 5 year sample size. This year, a bit of a down year, but that's not his doing. That's injuries, and that's the St. Louis Blues just downright being bad at hockey.
Well, to be fair, if I look at Elias Pettersson's numbers, that can also be partly due to the Vancouver Canucks
last year?
To the Vancouver Canucks being bad at hockey.
They were right on the precipice of the playoffs a year ago, but they had that fallout with JT Miller and Pettersson and Quinn Hughes saying that this is a toxic environment. It was a mess last year in Vancouver.
No doubt about it.
And it's even worse this season. So, yes, that can contribute to the mental state of a player. That can contribute to the lack of production of a player. I get all of that. But we have a large enough sample size now of Pettersson not being the same player that got 100 points. The talent is there. It doesn't just go away. It doesn't vanish overnight. But why is this worrying trend continuing to go downward? Why is that happening? That is the question that I'm asking.
I think and the reason I want to get him is because I think the answer to that question is the situation in Vancouver has become toxic.
It might be. But what if you do acquire him? What if you get him and that deal and there's no money retained whatsoever from Vancouver? If it doesn't work out here in Montreal or Detroit or Buffalo or Minnesota or wherever he goes or gets traded to, can you recover from giving away that contract? Can you recover from paying him $11.6 million for 6 seasons after this one? I don't know. And I get that the cap is going up, but that is a financial burden if I've ever seen one. I just don't know if you can overcome that kind of contract if he's still playing the way that he's playing.
And again, I think you can. I always like to look at, glass half full. What's it going to look like if it does work? You keep bringing up glass half empty. What's going to happen if he doesn't pan out? What I'll tell you is if he doesn't pan out, the money owed and the cap number are different. You might be able to trade him anyways because of the cap number being high and the salary being down around $8 million after this year. And number 2, the salary cap is going to continue to increase. So
you'd think so, right?
What is $11 million today? You might not look at it the same way as you'll look at what is an $11 million player in 5 years from now.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
Okay. So you bring him in, and he's a part of your team now.
Mm-hmm.
Elias Pettersson is your number 2 center or your number 1 center, whatever it may be. I think that's it. That's the extent of the moves that the Montreal Canadiens can make because of that money, because of having to pay Ivan Demidov and having to probably extend Caden Gooley in a couple of years' time.
Oh no, he already got taken care of.
Yeah,
not too long ago. That's a long time from now. I think he's got 4 years.
But it was 4 years left.
Yeah.
Anyways, you're going to have to pay the guys that you have, right? So I think Elias Pettersson coming in, that is the extent of the moves that you can make. With that in mind, Mitch, Pettersson, everybody else locked up right now, maybe Michael Hage coming in because you didn't have to deal him in that Pettersson move. Is that good enough to compete for a Stanley Cup?
I think the answer is yes.
You think so?
Yes, and as far as having to pay Demidov, you're going to be freeing up $18 million between Dano, Gallagher, and Anderson by the time Demidov's contract has to be signed. You get $18 million right there. Right, and then even after next year, you'll get another $4 million out of the Alex Carrier deal coming off the book. So that's $22 million you're going to be able to play with. So just, I know we look at the salary cap in a vacuum and look at it like in the moment. Things clear up pretty well. And I do believe the Pettersson contract, you could kick it down the road. And if that's my only move that I can make for a little bit here, I'm comfortable with that move. But again, I'm a big fan of the player. And I know most people out there are down on the player because of what has transpired over the last couple of years in Vancouver. But I want to hear from the people, Peter. At 514-790-1690, should the Canadiens try to acquire Elias Pettersson, who's available out of the Vancouver Canucks? 514-790-1690, 11690 on the text message board. Have your say is coming up next.